Good morning. I just wanted to check in with you this morning. I hope you're doing okay. I'm actually out here at my subdivision getting ready to go take a walk around the lake. And I don't know how this is going to end up going. This is not your typical sermon where I'm eager for you to try to share it with everybody and all that good stuff. I just want to talk to you this morning and just have a conversation. I'm going to get ready to go. It's freezing out here, so I just, this is not one of those organized, perfect sermons with all the points and stuff. So I honestly don't know exactly how it's going to work out. But I'm hoping just that I can talk to you. And that something I say, something that we talk about will encourage you. I want to talk pretty much from the thought when you feel like giving up. And believe it or not, I have felt like giving up quite a bit. I would say actually out of all my life, probably the past 5 years, I've wanted to give up more times than all the rest of my life combined. And I'm 50, so you can kind of quantify how long that's been. But the last 5 years, probably more than any other time, I've wanted to give up in different ways. Now, when I say give up, I'm talking about the whole element of discouragement. And when you're discouraged, you're pretty much at a point where it's really hard to get motivated. It's really hard to get yourself out of bed sometimes and just trying to push forward. And those goals and dreams and aspirations you once had, it can start to just be like, you're just kind of going through the motions and not getting a whole lot accomplished. And honestly, that's where I've been quite a bit in the last 5 years. Looking at it from just kind of what I thought was going to happen with my life and plans and stuff like that. Goals and dreams, I'm a pretty achievement-oriented guy, so I wanted to go accomplish all these great things. And some great things have happened in my life, and I don't take anything for granted what I have. But I know that I'm not the only one. If you and I are talking just face to face right now, I know I'm not the only one who you've experienced some droughts and some discouragement and just times where you just were like, whatever. I'm kind of in one of those places right now, so I'm a little nervous about doing this. But like I said, this is just you and me talking, okay? This is not a like, share, subscribe situation. In fact, who knows? Maybe when I get done with it, I won't even edit and post it, and maybe I won't even share it, and we'll just put up a recording of something in the past. I'm not really sure how this is going to go. I just woke up feeling like I just needed to get some stuff off my chest and have a conversation and believe that stuff I've studied this week, somehow it's all going to come together and it's going to be a blessing to you. Because I know that if I'm feeling like sometimes that feeling of when you want to give up, and I'm feeling some of that lately, I'm pretty sure some others that are going to watch this feel that way too. So let's see what happens. I'm going to go on a little hike with you and kind of share what's on my heart and see where this goes, okay? Just give me a second to get going and we'll be on our way. Yeah, so as I was saying, just a conversation about the thought I have is when you feel like giving up. And I don't know. I think that sometimes when you think about discouragement, it's basically when you just start lacking motivation in stuff you're doing in life. And it could be because you've tried so many different things, and it just sometimes it feels like you just, no matter what you try to do, you just don't quite get the success you wanted. Or if you've had so many different setbacks in your life, the minute you feel like things are getting, to where they're on track, then all of a sudden another crisis hits, another challenge hits. And I mean, it can come from anything. It can happen in family relationships. You got challenges going on there. You can have some major financial setbacks. I mean, all the health stuff that can happen. It can overwhelm you, and then you just kind of get like, man, is it ever going to get better? I think for me, like I was saying, discouragement is really, when you have a loss of confidence or a loss of enthusiasm, you just become dispirited about a lot of things and just feel like you're really not all that enthused about what's going on in your life. And, can make it just hard to get motivated to try something new. Or I know for me, like for the past 5 years or so with planting Perimeter Pointe Church, I came out here from California with just all these grand ideas about what being a pastor and planting a church and all that was going to be. And I'll be honest, it was probably viewing it all from the worldly perspective of, oh yeah, we're going to come out here and plant a church and ministry, and it's just going to grow. So many people are going to get saved and grow in their faith, and it's just going to be amazing. And it has been an amazing journey, and I am so grateful for the people in my life right now in my church. It's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, gosh, don't get me started talking about people in my life that have stuck it out through thick and thin, and my church family, and people who just support in so many different ways. But you get goals, you have dreams and visions of things that you think are going to happen, and when they don't come to pass, or it seems like everything you try, whether it's a relationship or, like in my case there, a vision of the church, and seems like whatever you try, sometimes there's unmet expectations. Got some geese here. I always think of geese when I hear them honk. It reminds me how geese will encourage you. When they're honking, they're actually encouraging. When they fly in that V formation thing, they're actually encouraging each other. That's what scientists have discovered. So this guy over here is encouraging us. Keep pressing on this trail, keep pressing on in life. I don't know what to make of this scene here, but some geese sitting in the mud. Yeah, it's some disgusting, filthy, muddy water. And I always look at geese as like the ones that are soaring to new heights, and talk about them going into V formation and how much they can accomplish. But if you're stuck in the mud, ugh, it's filthy, disgusting, dirty. And yet they're down there, beaks all the way in there, getting as much of the filth as they possibly can. That's what can happen in our lives if we continue to stay in sin and don't keep our minds, our hearts, our bodies clean, consecrated before the Lord. This is what it'll look like. Geese that are meant to soar in V formation and accomplish such great things. When we're stuck and complacent with our sins, we're just digging in dirt and going after scraps. I'm so used to seeing geese soaring through the sky in V formation and honking and everything. This is troubling to see my favorite animal, a goose, digging head deep in mud and dirt to get their food. It's just a picture of how God doesn't want us in the slop. He wants us flying away and soaring to higher heights. Get out of the dirt, get out of the muck, get out of the miry clay. Move forward in victory over those things that are trying to keep us from going forward in our purpose. Fly, guys. Go, 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 go. Get out of the mud. Fly. Wow. But anyhow, I really don't know how to put all this into words. So like I said, this is just you and me talking. get discouraged. And when I say feeling like giving up, I'm just saying maybe you give up on a dream. You're thinking about giving up on a dream. You're thinking about giving up on a relationship, thinking about giving up on a career path, thinking about giving up on fighting against a sin or an addiction. I mean, just fill in the blank on what you feel like right now. It's hopeless. There's nothing I can do to get this thing to change and improve. I've tried everything that I know to do, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better. And I'm just being honest with you. The most discouraged I have felt in my life has really been, I'm at a bench now with you. Is that too bright? I don't know. But the most discouraged that I've been has been in the last 5 years. And you know what? It's interesting with that, because remember, I'm talking about discouragement, which has more to it about motivation and getting up and trying again and getting fired up about stuff and really wanting to go after stuff and accomplish things and start new relationships, kind of get a fresh start, all that stuff you hear in preaching sometimes, like, oh, you've got a vision, you got to go fulfill, you got to go after your dreams and all that kind of stuff. That kind of thing is what I'm talking about. But also, discouragement is when you really don't have any desire to do any of that. It's different from like crisis events. There's probably some overlap, but when I think of like crisis events, I mean, I can remember some really tough years. In 2015, I lost both my parents, and I had a really tough ending to a job. It was a very short period of extreme difficulty, but I wasn't discouraged to the point where I didn't get up and want to start going after stuff again. It took a little while to get over the trial, but I was ready to tackle on some new challenges. In fact, I took over Perimeter Pointe at that time, and man, I gave it everything I got. I've been giving it everything I've got up to a point until discouragement has kicked in. And I realize that I'm in a place of discouragement when it comes to ministry. Like I said, I love the people that are still sticking with me because they probably feel it too. When your leader is discouraged, when your leader can only get so far, I've heard John Maxwell say there's something called the leadership lid. You can only go as high as your leader. That is the most convicting thing that I think of when I think of the fact that I am in a season of discouragement, because you've got other people that are counting on you, right? So you can't just, sit there and stay in that place. Or if you do, it's to the detriment of other people. And so, do you hear the difference that it's not about distressing situations and trials, although those could overlap and cause you to become discouraged? I'm just talking about life in general gets to a point where you just don't have much motivation to really keep trying on stuff. There's a difference to deep, depression, although it can overlap. There's a difference to a crisis, although that can overlap. It's just when you lack motivation to kind of press forward. That is kind of what I'm trying to get at today. And hear me when I say, if you're in a place of sadness, if you're in a place of loss, if you're in a place where someone you love is sick, if you're in a place where you're worried about your finances or just anything going on in your life in general, I think this applies. But I'm speaking from my vantage point of like, man, what do you do when you're just discouraged and you're really not all that pumped up about anything and getting going on what God has called you to do, or what you feel in your heart, where you used to have passion and now you don't have that same drive. Could be a marriage you stopped trying in a long time ago. It could be you're still beating yourself up over sins that God forgave you of a long time ago, and it's holding you back. Feeling guilty or feeling like you still don't deserve the best, or don't deserve, to be loved by someone, or, it could be anything that is just keeping you, down and discouraged. And if you're going through something that's terrible right now, I think this will help as well. I think the greatest example, and the reason I probably got on this subject is because all week long I have been looking at this passage of scripture and the life of David that made me think about, what you can do when you feel like giving up. I just want to read this situation that David was facing, and so you can hear how bad it was and just how it's reasonable for him to have been not only discouraged, but greatly distressed. And we want to learn from what he taught about how to deal with when you feel like giving up. Listen to what it says in 1 Samuel chapter 30. It says, David and his men arrived in Ziklag on the third day. The Amalekites had raided the Negev and attacked and burned down Ziklag. They also had kidnapped the women and everyone in it, from the youngest to the oldest. They had killed no one, but had carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men arrived at the town, they found it burned down. Their wives, their sons, and daughters had been kidnapped. David and the troops with him wept loudly until they had no strength left to weep. In this particular setting, David, just backtracking a little bit, this whole situation David was in, first of all, it was tragic and the most discouraging thing I can imagine happening. But basically, just to give you the short story, David had spent a lot of time being on the run from a king by the name of Saul. And the reason that happened was because at a very young age, David was a warrior. David was successful in what he did. David was the one who went out and defeated Goliath. David was the one who eventually became basically a leader of armies, and everywhere he went, he was successful in fighting. David also, Saul knew David had been anointed to be king, so he was going to take over where Saul left off. And Saul was a disobedient king. David was a man after God's own heart and was not only anointed to be king, but isn't forever, generations to come, David's lineage was going to have a king sitting on the throne over God's people. So somewhere along the way, Saul got really jealous of David. And there were multiple attempts Saul had on taking David out. I mean, one time he was just in a room and I think he threw a spear across the room trying to kill David. There was another time where, David would frequently hide, and David had a couple of chances actually to take out Saul. There was one time where Saul went to relieve himself in a cave while he was hunting down David. He didn't know where he was, but David happened to be in the very back of that cave. And when Saul went to relieve himself, David could have easily killed him there. But instead, he cut off the edge of his robe or something like that without Saul knowing. And even David felt terrible about that. Why? Because David was always loyal to Saul. And David was always a man after God's own heart. We're going to discover as I talk to you. And David struggled with all the stuff we struggle with disobedience, discouragement, distress, you name it. But David was a man after God's own heart the whole time. And so he never wanted to harm Saul. He had another chance to do it. Saul and his soldiers that were with him, they were sleeping one time, sound asleep, and the Lord had even given them a sleep where David and his soldiers that were with him could go and could have killed Saul again, but he was like, no. He was loyal. Boy, that'll get me going on discouragement. Have you ever just been really loyal? I'm not trying to ever put myself like in this conversation as like I'm always loyal to a T. But you know, that's one thing that I feel like I was taught to be from an early age is you show loyalty. You're loyal to the people in your life. And gosh, if there's a place where you can get messed up is when you feel like you've been loyal, like David was loyal to the very, very end with Saul. He had opportunities to kill him. In fact, when Saul was killed in battle and somebody ran to tell David that he had died, David had that guy killed because the guy was coming as if that was a good thing. But David was like, no, the anointed has fallen and you're trying to think you're bringing me good news? Had him killed. So David was loyal to a fault and loyal to the end. And I don't know if you've found this to happen, but you can be like really loyal and really give people everything you've got. And then when you've done everything you know in your heart to be loyal, sure, you've made plenty of mistakes. You probably made some missteps. You probably haven't always done with what was right with that person or whatever. But if you know in your heart of hearts you've been loyal to someone and then you feel like they walk all over that, or they're jealous of what you're doing, and so they don't care what you might have been loyal to them about, now they're intimidated by you, or they're, basically they've turned on you, and no matter what you've done, or even if you determine to stay loyal, to this day I can think of people that have totally bailed, and yet in a moment I would I would get back with them if that opportunity was there, because loyalty is just something that I can't shake. So if there's room to forgive, if there's room to reconcile, I still have people to this day that have hurt me so badly, but the loyal side of me would be like, in a moment, I'd want to get back together with them, serve with them, do ministry with them. If I knew they were wanting to get back, if I've already made my attempts, we can forgive and move on. I still have a heart for people that have even wounded me by turning on me when I've been so loyal with them. And so I guess I'm just processing David. I mean, he was loyal to a fault. He never was disloyal to Saul. And yet Saul always wanted to come after him, always resented him, always was jealous. But David, man, he managed to not let that get to him. Anyway, but the other thing is that David was on the run from Saul, and at a certain point, he was like, if I don't get out of this area where David is searching for me, or Saul is searching for me, I'm going to be on the run for the rest of my life, and he's eventually going to hunt me down and kill me. And so David just decides, I'm going to go to where the Philistines are, and I'm going to live there. And basically that was Israel's enemy. So he was going to enemy territory, and he was saying, I'm going to camp out there. I'm going to make my home there. And he was literally out there with a guy named Achish, who was the ruler of the area where David was. And he stayed with them for like a year and 4 months. And once he made it over there to where the Philistines were, Saul gave up on following him. But here's the thing, is that David made that move to go from being chased by Saul. He made that move without praying to God. He took it upon himself just to get out of there. He said, I'm just going to go to the Philistine country, and I'm going to go ahead and make that decision. And it's beautiful out here, by the way. I know I'm kind of rambling, so let me just kind of show you what's going on. It's so beautiful in the lake. You got my favorite geese out here hanging out. Isn't that awesome? It's just a little panoramic view of where we are. So anyway, the big thing I want you to get with that is that David made a move without praying. He did that without seeking the Lord. He did that, and eventually it ended up costing him. And other times before this, remember, David was a warrior and a leader in battle. He would always seek the Lord. The scripture in 1 Samuel, over and over again, he would say, Lord, should we go up and attack this enemy army? Should we go up? Should we go up? And God would tell him. In fact, there was one time I read this week where, David said, should we go up? And the Lord said, yes, but then he gave him the battle plan. He's like, you need to come at your enemy from different angles. I'm going to have you have some come in from this angle. I'm going to have some of you come in from this angle. So David would seek the Lord for direction. But when it came down to discouragement and wanting to throw in the towel on this whole thing with Saul, and I can see, you already heard me vent, I can see why he'd be sick of it. Not only is this man somebody he'd been loyal to his whole life, but he was trying to kill him. And he had also, shown Saul more than once that he could have killed him, but why would I possibly do this? You are the anointed, you're the king. He was loyal to a fault. But David finally I'm going to die here if I keep running from this guy. And I'm not willing to kill him myself, so I might as well just check up out and go over to where the Philistines are. And he did that without praying. That's a good principle right there, is whatever you're discouraged with, whatever you're feeling like you want to quit on right now, whatever you feel like you're just complacent, you're not getting anywhere, don't just take it upon yourself to get up and do something for the sake of doing it without consulting with God first. If you're going to make some moves, as you'll see when I get into some points and principles we can get from David's life, whatever you're feeling right now, don't rush to make a move without praying about it and finding peace about it and getting God's green light, okay? Don't move. I'm here with, what's your name?
Jay.
Jay?
Uh-huh.
I'm here with Jay. Are these your boys?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, I'm a little upset because Jay caught a bass, and I've been here for 15 years, and I've never caught a bass. We get these little greenish fish, but it's just funny that I ran into Jay and his family. When you think about the times where you've wanted to quit, kind of what's been on your heart, and how did you get out of it, I guess, is basically it. Think of...
Yeah, well, there's been oppositions, but when it gets tough or it's not going my way or you want to give up to do something different, I pretty much just pause and pray, kind of reevaluate and get at it, because sometimes it doesn't go how you plan.
Yeah.
So, I'll tell you a quick story.
Please.
I think back in 2006 when the economy was bad, I got laid off. I did new construction and ended up starting my own business trying to rehab homes and foreclosures, and I got a contract and got started, but none of that worked out. I was doing the work, wasn't getting paid late, and I bought some lawn equipment to maintain the yards on those foreclosures, and that didn't work out. So ended up just finding my own yards, and I became a lawn service company. So I didn't set out to do that, but that's what I ended up doing for about 10 years,
Yeah.
And then just about 4 years ago, everything turned around and I got back into new construction. So
okay.
You just gotta see where it takes you. But just like I tell my wife sometimes when she's going through stuff, you can't keep pushing the square peg in the round hole. Maybe you got to stop and do something different, go a different way to get where you're going instead of trying to go straight.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I just stay flexible, slow down, pray, and just try to keep going.
That is a great story, how you just you trusted the path, and he had a plan behind all that. I'm sure that even when you were doing that, it was building you up in some areas of your abilities and career and your personality. Being a dad, all these other things probably got worked on while you were taking what you may have thought was a detour.
Right. And sometimes that's what it is, but you still get there. Even with new construction, you plan certain things in a certain order or a certain way, and sometimes you got to just figure out your way around it.
Yeah.
If your cabinets are delayed, you put the floors in. You're gonna get there. You just gotta. Sometimes it gets out of order a little bit.
Yeah.
But you get there.
But you're gonna get there. I like that.
Have I just can't give up now. I've come too far where I started from, and nobody told me the road would be easy. And he brought me this far to leave me. I said I can't give up now. I just can't give up now. I've come much too far from where I started from. Nobody told me the road would be easy, and I don't believe he's brought me this far to leave me.
So David ends up in Philistine territory under the rulership of a guy named Achish. And there comes a point actually where Achish is aligning his Philistine army with other Philistines and other leaders to get together, and they're going to go fight against Israel. And so David was even willing to go fight against his own people at that point. He was literally lined up to go and fight against Israel when one of the other leaders that was leading along with Achish said, "You have David and those Israelites with you and your troops? You think he's going to come fight with us against his people?" And Achish is like, "Yeah, he's loyal. He's been here. He's fought for me. He's gone out and fought battles." And really, David actually would go out and fight battles and he would defeat them, but he would claim that he was defeating people in the southern Judah to give Achish more of a sense that David could be trusted. He was really actually taking out other enemies. He wasn't taking his own people out in Judah. But anyway, the point is that David and his soldiers were told by these other guys through Achish, there's no way that they can go fight with us. Who knows if David wouldn't set an ambush when they go back to fighting with the people? Who knows if he wouldn't set an ambush and take us out? And so Achish was like, "David, I know you're loyal to me." There was loyalty to a fault, again with David, with Achish from, that would have been an enemy if he was still, with Saul and Israel at that point. But he was loyal to a fault now with this Philistine leader by the name of Achish. But Achish said, "I know you're loyal, but they don't want you to go with us, so you need to go back home." And by this time, David had already requested from Achish to get some land, and it was in a place called Ziklag. This is where David and his two wives and then the soldiers that he was with, there were 600 altogether, and their families and whatnot, they were in a place called Ziklag. But they had all left the wives and the children and all their belongings behind when they were getting up to go with these other Philistines to fight in the battle. So when Achish said, "Go back," when they got back, it took 3 days to get back from where they were willing and prepared to fight. When they were sent back, they did 3 days journey, about 75 miles, got back to Ziklag, only to find that their wives, their children, all of their things had been taken, and it was by the Amalekites, another enemy. They had taken everything and their kids and their wives and burned down the city of Ziklag. And that's what David saw when they returned. And I just shared that with you. And the soldiers and David, having lost everything, they were as discouraged as anyone can be. And the text says, David and the troops with him wept loudly until they had no strength left to weep. And basically what I get from this is that David could have absolutely lost it at that point, couldn't he? If you or I were going through similar circumstances, I'm sure you could be saying, I feel like giving up. But guess what he did instead? Listen to what it says. It says that David was in a difficult position because the troops talked about stoning him, for they were all very bitter over the loss of their sons and daughters. So to add insult to injury, not only had he lost everybody and they lost everybody, but his own soldiers were like mad at him because of what he had led them into and the devastation that caused their families. But listen to what it says. It says, "But David found strength in the Lord his God." Another version says, "But David encouraged himself in the Lord." And that's where I want to go with the remaining time that we have, is to look at 5 keys I think that David shows us that's going to be critical for us if we're going to make it through this rough patch where we feel like giving up. The first thing is that we see in the text, when everything was wiped out, mind you, he had already been disobedient, right? He didn't pray. He went back. He shouldn't have been over there in Philistine territory to begin with. He should not have been there. He was disobedient. He took things into his own hands. So really, here's another thing, and I'm guilty of this too. Could it be that part of the situation you're in and struggling to make ends meet and you're discouraged and really not wanting to move forward because you didn't follow what God wanted you to do? Uh-oh. Maybe there's things you were disobedient on. Maybe there were some things you didn't, fully give up in your past. Maybe there's some struggles with sin and stuff that, you've been given opportunity after opportunity, and, everybody is going to struggle with some things. You've heard me say that time and time again. There are going to be temptations and struggles, and you're not going to, live without sin. There's going to be struggles with sin at times. But could it be because of sin and disobedience is a large part of where we are? Or because a lot of why we might be really struggling right now to move forward is because we weren't faithful or obedient in some other things we should have done in the past. And David was in the predicament that he was in because of not seeking the Lord. And if he just sought the Lord, do you think he would have given him the advice to go over to where the enemy was? Or would he have given him direction and given him provision and given him the protection and everything like he had done every time in the past, where he was delivered from Saul, never killed. He was, when he was a shepherd, he never got killed by a bear, never got killed by a lion. In fact, he killed them. He had a track record of God protecting him, but he took it upon his own hands and went to this enemy land. And it was the grace of God that he didn't have to go fight that battle against his own people. That would have left him guilty and condemned and convicted for the rest of his life. So in a sense, God was very merciful in getting him pulled out of there. Has he delivered you and me from things where if he'd allowed us to go all the way down that path, gone down that lane, we would have had something happen that would have had a lifelong devastating impact, either emotionally or something we would always feel discouragement about, or could it have literally affected our lives physically? We could have maybe gone down a road we wouldn't be here today, or we wouldn't have been anywhere near where we could have been or where we are now, even though it may not be where we want to be. Are there some times where you look back and know it could have gone a whole lot worse than it is now? And I think that would probably be what David would have been up against had he fought against his own people with the guys that he went over to the Philistine land without clearance from God. He would have felt awful. So still, he gets back, and God is a God who will chasten and discipline and whatnot. So when he got back and everything was taken, and his wives and his children and everything that they had, all their belongings, and the city burned down, it says David and the troops with him wept loudly until they had no strength left to weep. Going back to my church family that might be saying pastor's kind of losing it here, notice that David and the soldiers were together weeping until they could weep no more. That's the first principle I want you to get. When you feel like giving up, you need to weep. You need to weep. You need to feel okay to cry out until you can cry no more. If you read all of David's Psalms, a good amount of them are laments. In fact, go back and look at a message I did called It's Okay to Cry. And you will know that a good cry is medicine for the soul. But the point I wanted to make to the church family is that David was with who when they wept until they couldn't weep anymore? He was with his soldiers. He was with the army. He was the leader that they always looked to be the strong warrior leader. You know, he had defeated tens of thousands in battle, and Saul had defeated, thousands in battle. But here he was at his weakest moment. He was discouraged. He probably knew he had been disobedient. He was depressed and downright scared and horrified at what had happened to his family and at all of the others that were hurt by this. But guess what? When he wept, which is the first principle I want you to get when you feel like giving up, who did he weep with? He wept with those that were in his inner circle. He wept with those that he was in the trenches with. He wept with those who he was in the battle with. And so really, I'm not going to worry so much about my church family hearing about this now that I think about it, because God's put us in each other's lives to be able to weep when things get discouraging. And that's the first thing I pray to God you have people in your life to weep with. You have at least a few individuals that they know everything about you when you're discouraged, when you accomplish great things, when you're struggling with those demons that try to keep you bound, the things that you fight against, and when you're feeling unmotivated and discouraged. Who do you have in your life that will weep with you? Because if you feel like giving up and you start trying to do everything and living in isolation and pushing everything out of your life so you're there on your own, well, if you don't have people that you can truly be yourself with and weep and be real with about what you're facing in your life, it's really going to be hard to pick yourself up. You could end up just wasting away your life being isolated and complacent and alone. And I know God doesn't want that for any of us. So the first thing we get when we feel like giving up from David's most heartbreaking, heart-wrenching experience is to weep. The second thing I see is that there's a bug on my screen. We need to wait. I've already started to talk about this, but can you imagine to get there? All of their family and everything is taken and things are burned to the ground. What would you want to do? How would you react if you saw that kind of devastation all at once? And just, you came upon a sudden tragedy. You might even be facing that right now. Sudden eviction, sudden foreclosure, sudden family member is deathly ill, sudden catastrophe breaks off in your life. What would you want to do? Well, the soldiers initially wept, but then you know what? These were guys, we're talking about soldiers. So I'm pretty sure, even though the text doesn't say it, the first thing they wanted to do was start running and going and finding their families and getting their stuff back. And I'm sure they were ready. The funny thing is, though, or the difficult thing is they were exhausted. They've been walking for 3 days. They come in thinking they're going to get to lay their head and see their families, and they're all gone. And so they are worn out and discouraged and feeling defeated. But then if you heard your family was taken away from you or bottom drops out on whatever, the first thing, if you're like me, if you're not careful, the first thing you're going to do is, I might start weeping like them until I could weep no more, but I'm going to be getting out there and trying to fix it immediately. Immediately. If I need to get some money in the house, immediately going to figure out a way to go get a job or get some money or whatever. If my relationship with my wife is struggling, immediately, and she won't do this, immediately I'm going to try to ask for forgiveness and talk to her and reconcile. And she doesn't always like to do that because she's going to put in the next principle that I had said. You not only need to weep, but you need to wait. Those soldiers, I'm sure, wanted to get up and going, but you know what? David showed them a great principle. When the bottom was dropping out, you know what he did? He not only wept with the other soldiers who were right there with him, and they probably were mad, by the way, because David was the one who brought them all into this in the first place. But once they wept, David showed them, I'm still a man after God's own heart. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do what got us into this problem in the first place. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to stop trying to move and fix everything. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to get alone with the Lord. The Bible says in Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. That is one of the ways when you're feeling like giving up because of catastrophe. You know, maybe you're feeling like giving up because you've exhausted everything you know to do. And maybe it's actually a blessing in disguise that you are where you are, feeling totally defeated, feeling totally like you don't even want to do it anymore. You know what? Actually, now that I think about it, when I get to that point, totally defeated, don't want to do it anymore, ready to throw in the towel, sick and tired of being sick and tired, that is a great place for God to move, because then he'll be like, okay, you ready to stop trying to do the things? Why don't you wait? Because it says, be still and know that I am God. In other words, be still, know, recognize, and understand that I am God. And I like what one other version says. In the Holman version, it says, stop fighting. Stop fighting. Are you like me? We'll just keep going and trying to do everything you can to fix it. And God was like saying all along, just be still. Stop. Get still with me. I was thinking of this movie I just watched called The Sound of Metal. You ought to watch it. I think it's on Amazon Prime. And it's about this heavy metal drummer. And he was playing some really hardcore heavy metal. In the beginning of the movie, I was like, that is the most hardcore heavy metal music I've ever heard. But he lost his hearing. In a matter of days, he lost his hearing and became totally deaf. And you can imagine that was his livelihood, music, and he was devastated. And he immediately went into fix-it mode. And he was trying to do everything to figure out how can I get my, what can I do to get this solved? And he learned that there was a surgery that could be done, but it would cost like $50,000 to $80,000. And he didn't know how to do that. So the girl that he was with got him checked into a place for the deaf, like a retreat, a place, to go away and kind of process and deal with this whole thing. And let me get walking a little bit again. And basically, go down here a little bit more. Basically, what ended up happening with this guy is he went to the camp, and he ended up that was where he was forced to wait and to be still. I can remember the leader of the camp there saw that he was just trying to do everything rather than just be still and accept this new normal that he was going to have to deal with. And so the guy made a deal with him. I'll let you stay here, room and board and everything, but you have to do one thing for me. Every morning you have to get up and you have to sit in a room, and when you have exhausted all your anger and emotion and everything else, I need you to sit down and write. I need you to journal. I need you to just put down what's going on with you until you can't write any longer. And that was a way for him to wait and to be still and to get everything he needed out of his system, basically. And eventually he ended up still trying to take action. And even though he was making a difference with other people who were deaf, he was working with the kids there, and he was finding happiness and joy again. Even though that was the case, he still ended up going and getting the surgery. And the surgery, he just did that. He sold his camper, he sold all his drums and sound equipment and everything else. But what ended up happening is, because he did that on his own, with really kind of running away from what was turning out to be a new normal that could have been a blessing, he ended up just going on his own. And the sound from the surgery, it was never normal again. He could hear, but it was always staticky. It was never, a good sound quality. And so at the end of the movie, he literally takes the hearing aids out and just goes back to preferring to being deaf. And, but we'll try to fix it. We'll try to work it. We'll try to make it all happen. We'll get into a frenzy trying to do everything, when sometimes we just need to wait. And then the third thing is, we need to watch. We need to watch. After all that waiting, I think the soldiers that were with David were impressed that in the midst of this horrific situation, he kept a level head. And then he went back to doing what he knew he should do, which it says, David asked the Lord, should I pursue these raiders? Will I overtake them? And so basically, David was in a great position at that point to hear from God. Isaiah 55:6 says, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Once you've gotten still, you've wept a little bit, you've let it all out, you've gotten still, you're back to where God has your attention, then you need to start asking him about your life, about the next steps, about what he wants to do. You need to be watchful. And, God is not going to, is not going to try to make you, wonder about his will for your life once he's gotten you to this point. He has ways that he can speak to you and I. He can speak to you obviously through the word. He can speak to you through this message. He can speak to you through loved ones. He can speak to you in prayer. He can speak to you through circumstances. However he wants to speak to you, at this point, you're ready to watch. And that's what David was like, okay, I know that it's going to take you to get me to move forward. When you feel like giving up, you're going to get to a point where it's going to take God to get you to move forward. But I like what he says. When he asks God and he's watching and he's waiting for his marching orders from God, he's looking to hear from God. He's ready to hear and desiring to move forward. Listen to what he says. And this is the fourth point. You got to weep. You got to wait. You got to watch. You got to walk. You got to walk. And he said to the Lord, should I pursue these raiders? In other words, David was ready to move out in faith. We got to be ready when we watch and God gives us a word. We got to have in us a faith to get up and go, to get moving. But I tell you this, if he gives you something and you just even start to step in the direction that he gives you, all of a sudden I just started walking faster. And if he gives you a direction and you just start walking in that direction, man, let me tell you, he will then put a whole lot of grace on that. He'll start opening doors. He'll start showing you the steps you need to take. He'll start reinvigorating those ideas, those dreams you had. He will get you just fired up. He will get you motivated again to get moving on that thing. He said, should I pursue? In other words, David was ready to go. Faith without works is dead. When God starts giving you motivation, when you feel like giving up, man, take every little bit you can, even if it's a baby step, even if it's just getting out of bed, even if it's just, putting your clothes on as if you are going to go do something, going to the gym or calling somebody, knocking out a few things on your to-do list. Get a couple wins under your belt. Start moving forward, little by little. And certainly if God gives you something to do, by the time he's given you direction, if he's directing you in something, he's already given you all the grace and ability you need to step forward on that. So here's the end of the story. I'm going to tell you the end of the story so you can know this all worked out. David and the warriors, they went out. They went out in battle and they defeated their enemy. The interesting thing is when they went out in faith to do this, certainly the enemy was going to have more than the 600 soldiers they had. But when they went out to go get their children and the spoils and their wives, their families back, 200 of David's 600 soldiers were too tired to go into battle, so they stayed behind. But the 400, it's like God wanted to make it even more seemingly like you couldn't do it, but they had to stretch their faith to go fight. So it's like you can start moving into something and then you got to stretch your faith even more and more. But the point is that David had already gotten the marching orders. David knew what God said would happen, which is you will defeat this army. You will be able to go up and get your families and get everything that was taken from you. In other words, David had a vision. He knew what was going to happen. And that's another principle, is that when you're going forward, what has God promised you? What has God told you he was going to do? Because, when you can get a vision of your future, it can really help you to keep going forward toward the goals, right? David knew two things. He knew that God said, go and fight this enemy army, but he also knew he had been anointed to become king. And so he knew he was going to make it. He knew the long-term plan was he was going to go and become the king over the entire nation of Israel. They got all their stuff back, and they even got the spoils of the Amalekites on top of all the things that they had taken. Not one person was hurt. I really wanted to say, though, if you don't have a vision for your life on even the fairly near future, ask God to give you kind of like, God, where are we going? What's coming next? Give me a little bit of the horizon. You need to get something to aim for, or you will have no way to move from feeling like giving up. You have to have a goal of some sort, a vision of some sort on where you want your life to go, where you want that marriage to go, where you want your finances to go, how you want your family to be, what you want your legacy to be, how you want your finances to be, what your goals are for your career. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You have to have a vision. Habakkuk says, write the vision, make it plain. And so really the last thing I want to give you, though, with all of this is that when you feel like giving up, the one thing you want to make sure you do, don't miss this, this is the most important of all, is you don't want to stop worshiping. You never want to give up worshiping. And can I tell you, when you feel like giving up, that is the number one thing that the enemy doesn't want you to do. He doesn't want you to worship God. In fact, if you get nothing else from this conversation that I'm having with you, the one thing that the enemy will try to steal when you feel like giving up is any desire to worship God. Oh, he'll let you worship. He'll let you worship the stock market. He'll let you worship your smartphone. He'll let you worship a person that you know that ain't right for you. You know that person ain't right. You'll worship the wrong relationship. You'll worship financial goals. You'll worship that career. You'll worship anything that, the enemy will be fine and dandy with you worshiping, just as long as it isn't worshiping God. And if you don't worship God, then when it comes to feeling like giving up, it's going to be really hard for you to do the other things that I just mentioned. So the undercurrent of all of this is you got to worship. And you want to know why I know that's true? Because I look at David, a man after God's own heart, even though he was one who made a plenty of mistakes, horrific, sinful life at times. He was still a man after God's own heart, and he was known not only as a warrior, but a worshiper. You look at his Psalms, he had one of the most intimate relationships with the Lord that anybody has ever had. We have got to worship. We worship our way out of the storms. We worship our way out of our complacency. We worship our way out of discouragement. We worship our way into direction and the future and the dreams and hearing from God. When you worship God, you get closer to him, and he will empower you. He will guide you. He will lift you. Worship is the one thing the enemy doesn't want you to do. Please hear me. Worship God. Sing to the Lord a new song. Spend quiet time in his word. Just be still and listen for his voice. Confess your sin if you need to, right? Tell him everything he already knows, but just come clean. Cry if you need to. Do all those things, but make no mistake about it. Worship him. When David was going through that, don't you think that he was worshiping? And don't you think that as he worshiped, he was recalling all of God's past faithfulness? Don't you know he probably remembered when he killed that Goliath with one stone and a slingshot, or when he killed the bear and the lion, or when time and time again he won battles? Don't you think he looked at the past and said, you know what? I'm worshiping God. He starts thinking about all that God had done in his past. And he was drawing close to God as he thought about the goodness of God. And he was able to move forward. And we know that he became a great king. The whole vision was fulfilled. Did he have some bumps and bruises along the way and some regrets and failures? Oh, yes, he did. But he also, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, he was a man after God's own heart. He did great and mighty things for God. He wrote Psalms that to this day helps every believer like you and I to get through our tough times. He became the king, the physical assignment that he had, but he just goes down in history as one of the greatest men who loved the Lord in all of human history. So if you are feeling like giving up at this point, I want to encourage you. Worship God. And if you don't know God, I want to encourage you to give your life to Jesus Christ today. Maybe you're watching this and stuck with it because you know from my own testimony here or story that everyone feels like giving up at some time. But when you feel like giving up, if you know God, then you know where to turn and you find help and strength and hope to keep on moving forward and accomplish what God has ordained, because whatever God says he's going to do, it's settled. It's already done, even though it might feel like it's. So if you need to give your life to Christ, I want to pray for you and pray for everybody here. Anyone who feels like giving up, hey, you got this church too. I've just confessed to my church family some of my challenges. You have yours. We can do this together. Perimeter Pointe Church keeps it real, right? And we're a family that sticks together and lifts each other up and helps us to move forward. Some are on a high and they can pull us along, and some are a little low and they need to be picked up. And it just works that way. God is good, puts us in a church family to help each other. Let me pray for you. God, I just thank you. I don't even know. Go back and look at this and see how much I need to edit it. It's so long. I just hope what I said flowed and made sense. And most of all, God, I have been discouraged. And we all get that way. But I also have enough stock with the company, been with you enough to know that every time I've ever felt like, don't even want to do it anymore, you have a way by your grace. Even this message is helping somebody to get up and to move forward into our purpose and our destiny. So I ask you, Father, now to speak to that person that is hearing this message, who knows you. Just hearing this lets them know, nope, you ain't going out like that. Now is not the time to quit. Wait, watch, weep if you have to, and then walk, but never stop worshiping. That is what we're going to do, God. And for that person that doesn't know you, God, I just pray that they say, Jesus, I need you. I need you to come into my life. I've made a mess of it. Please come into my life. I make you my Savior. You died for me on the cross, and I am now your child. Please guide me so I don't give up. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. It's just that simple. If you called out for Jesus today, you're a child of God. Message me. I'll get you going on the rest of the journey, but that was the biggest step you could ever make. And for those that are just barely holding on, you just heard that sometimes it gets hard for your pastor too. And we're in this together. I love you guys. And I hope this message has helped you out. And we'll catch you next week, okay? Take care. How have you dealt with discouragement?
Yeah, I can give an example, I guess. This past semester, I'm a college student, and we've got, hard work coming in, some stuff you've never seen before. So sometimes you can work really hard to try and get a certain grade, and you don't exactly get it. So, in that situation, you've got to just persevere and try and, look to God and pray and just figure out, a way to keep moving forward, because sometimes the path you've taken isn't always going to be the path that's going to lead you forward. So you just got to find out what works for you and use that to keep moving.
That's awesome. You said something, sometimes the path you take, we may take a path that we chose to take that isn't always the best path, right?
Yeah, like some stuff you've tried before isn't always going to work in the future.
Yeah.
Switching up tactics is something that like with fishing too, you got to change that you're using to see
Okay.
the results.
Go ahead. You got preaching in your blood there. Different kinds of bait to catch fish, right?
So, yeah.
Man, that's really good. What do you do when you feel discouraged, or how do you fight discouragement?
Well, discouragement is often a tool of the enemy to try to separate you from, one, your calling as a son or daughter of God, and two, to try to make you feel like you're alone. One of the first things I do is sink into prayer, because I know a majority of the time when you don't understand what's going on around you, you need perspective outside of yourself. And prayer gives you that perspective. The next thing I often do is go to the Word. Now, there are times when you can't get to the Word immediately because of where you are. You breathe the word of prayer, and God sends a word to you, probably something that you read this morning, or something you read last week, or something you read when you were a child. That word comes within you. Now, the word has power, and the power of God is what you need to lift you up when you're down. The other thing I do is take a walk. My children are homeschooled, so there were tough days when they had to do a lot of work, and I was also being bombarded by work. And I often say to them, you know what, let's go for a walk. Walking sometimes, or some people say exercising, but I prefer walking, gives you some level of perspective. When you walk and you go and you look at nature, the bird that flies past you, that cardinal that you saw just a moment ago, reminds you that God takes care of his own.
Oh, that's good.
It reminds you that he is a provider. When you walk by and you see the trees that have been standing there for years, you realize that they didn't walk around looking for their sustenance. It came to them. And it also gives you the notion that somebody greater than you is looking after all of this.
Yeah.
And can look after you.
Well, that's good.
So there's no reason, after looking at praying and the word of God and looking at nature, there's no reason for me to feel down anymore, because I understand that my purpose may not be fully explained at that moment, but there is a purpose. And soon and very soon, it will be realized if I'm patient. Now, there's one thing that I often do that I have not mentioned, and that is to sing. I may not sing sometimes, but there's a song I love, which even as I was sitting by the lake, I was playing on my phone, Be Still My Soul, the Lord is on your side. And that picks me up from whether I'm splat out on the ground because of a situation, because of what somebody said, or maybe just because it's a direct assault by the enemy. Just to know that if I'm still, Christ will fight my battles. There's a text I want to leave with you in Exodus chapter 14, verse 14. It says, I'll fight for you and you shall hold your peace. That's a profound statement that God gave to Moses to let him know that, you know what, though he's faced with Pharaoh and his army, he should be still because God will fight for him. And that's the comfort that I have for you and for everyone who's going to be viewing this.
Yeah.
That when you trust God, be still. Allow him to do for you that which you can't do. You are still his special chosen one, the one whom he's expended all of the resources of heaven to one man, to the death of Christ, for your and my salvation. Then if he has done that, what more scripture says he wouldn't be willing to do for us? And today, that's what we must always remember, that God is truly the one who has your interest, your purpose, and most importantly, your salvation at heart.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire, and in darkest night, you are close like no